Hello everybody and welcome to OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. I'm Jack and today I'm going to be finishing off my early look at some of the Supercharge Breaker and some of the other decks that we have in Japan that we haven't done a first impressions of yet. Surging Sparks comes out on the 8th of November, so not too long to wait now. I think we've got about 2 weeks until we know the full set of Supercharge Breaker. So we're going to know the full set in English in a couple of weeks as well. So yeah, very exciting times. It's going to be our last set of 2024. I'm going to start with the Ceruledge and Sylveon decks just because there's not too much to talk about in them. The Ceruledge EX is a Terra type EX that's a stage 1 fire type with the Abyssal Flame attack that does 30 for 1, and you do 20 more damage for each energy card in your discard pile. This has seen some success over in Japan, and I think it will probably translate to a half decent deck over here. Feels similar to like a Goldengo type deck where you have high damage output on a stage 1 for relatively low cost. This has seen a lot of play with just like as a pure fire deck, but also some play with the Archaludon that I talked about in yesterday's video. Sort of combining those two for like early game pressure and sort of late game tankability, I guess. But yeah, I don't think this card is going to be like amazing, but I think it's going to be half decent. I think it's going to be a another similar like I say Goldengo level deck where it's sort of maybe B or C tier, but it can definitely steal games here and there and should do what it's trying to do quite consistently. It also has the Amethyst Rage attack, which is 280 for 3, which is very impressive, but I think a lot of the time you're just going to be really leaning into Abyssal Flame anyway. To help with that, these kinds of decks are like pre-packaged and all try and synergize and do things or like try and work together quite well, and because of that they all have like a specific A spec. In this one, or in this case, it's the Perfect Mixer, which lets you search your deck for up to 5 cards and discard them, then shuffle your deck. So obviously, typically in this deck, you're just searching for 5 energy and bidding them off. I don't know that that's really a strong enough effect for an ace spec, so I don't know whether the deck will play Perfect Mixer or whether a better ace spec will exist. We have a lot of good discard cards right now anyway. We have like your normal researchers, but we have Ultra Ball, we have Vessel, we have Greninja, we have lots of ways of discarding energy anyway, so I don't know whether you'd necessarily want to play this actually in the Ceruledge deck if you were building it from scratch, but you can see why it was put into the deck from like a pre-constructed deck perspective. Outside of this deck though, I have seen some talk about whether you could like rebuild Lugia to play this. So you play, rather than playing like heavy draw supporters and research and stuff, you just play like heavy items or even Ionos and stuff. Heavy Arvans and or Ionos and Arvans and Iridas, not Ionos, to try and search out for that Perfect Mixer on turn 1 or 2 of the game. You have like a couple of turns to do it rather than trying to weave together like a combo of Ultra Balling double Archeops. But obviously there will be the 10% of games where you prize Perfect Mixer, so you'll still need to build the decks to be able to discard Archeops anyway. So I don't think it will become the way of playing Lugia, but I think there will be some people that maybe try it. But I think overall it won't be strong enough. It won't be the way to play Lugia. Other than that, I don't think there's too many good uses. Similarly with other decks, decks like Regidrago, which like a lot of cards or a lot of specific cards in the discard pile, I don't think that's gonna play it either, because things like Prime Catcher, being able to reuse Prime Catcher is insanely powerful with the V-Star power. So yeah, I don't think it's going to see too much play. I could see a couple of decks maybe trying to rebuild things or rebuild their lists or the archetype to try and work around it, but I don't think it's really strong enough in too many situations. The Sylveon deck does at least have a couple of other interesting cards. It has an Azumarill, which has Twinkling Soap as an ability, which lets you use Double Edge for 1 Psychic if you have a Terra Pokemon in play. This has been pretty successful in Japan, and again, I think it will be a decent enough deck in over here. I don't think it's going to be crazy powerful. I think it's still got a couple of weaknesses, and typically like where we're seeing it be successful in Japan is a lot of the times like League Cup level events. So I don't think this is going to be like blowing up the metagame, but I think it'll be a decent rogue option. Being able to use Double Edge dealing 230 for 1 is very powerful. Typically the Terra people are playing is Cornerstone Ogerpon, so you've also got a little bit of disruption in there as well, and your opponent maybe will struggle to deal with the Terra Pokemon in play for you to so you can just consistently Twinkling Soap over and over, or Double Edge over and over again. But the fact you deal 50 to yourself, leaving you at 70 HP, means that you're always pretty much going to be knocked out turn after turn, so you're always only ever going to be trading up 2-1, I guess. And anything, it feels like a deck like Dragapult is really going to struggle, or Azumarill is going to really struggle to deal with a deck like Dragapult, where they're able to sprinkle some damage counters onto the board and eventually get to the point where you're not knocking them out with Double Edge, but potentially you're knocking yourself out if they've had a couple of turns to spread some damage onto the board and stuff like that. So I don't think this is mind-blowing. I think it's a fun rogue archetype. It reminds me of a bit like a Grand Bull style archetype or whatever, where it's a funky stage 1, but I don't think it's really going to be too impactful overall. But I wait to be pleasantly surprised. Like I say, it has had some decent success in Japan. Again, they are like League Cup level events, but regardless, it could translate well over here. Sylveon EX is a really interesting one. I think it's got 270 HP, and for 3 energy you deal 160 and you reduce 100 next turn. So really reminds me of Goodra, but it's a Goodra that I think has a nicer attack cost. Does a little bit less damage, but reduces a little bit more damage. And I think typically, like 200, like Goodra was never really one-shotting anything anyway, so Magical Charm is two-shotting everything the same way Goodra would have in most senses, but you're reducing a little bit more damage than you would be normally. So I think in ways it's slightly better than Goodra. It also has an Eevee, which you can see just on the right of the screen there, that I'll zoom in on in a sec, but it basically lets you evolve into Sylveon the turn you play Eevee, which is quite powerful. It means that you can immediately get your Sylveon out and be quite tanky, but also with some kind of energy acceleration, could potentially start Magical Charming the turn you put an Eevee down, which is quite cool. There's also Angelite, which for a water, a lightning, and a psychic, deals or says shuffle 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon and all cards attached into their deck, and you can only use this if none of your Pokemon used Angelite on your last turn. So shuffling, like being able to gust up something like, I don't know, a Rotom or something, and then Angelite shuffling in a Pidgeot and a Charizard EX is pretty broken, to be honest. It's potentially very powerful, especially if you're able to combine it with like an Iono or something as well. The attack cost is definitely awkward. Obviously, we have plenty of ways of being able to potentially get around this. We have Crispin, we have Sparkling Crystal, all of these kinds of effects. So we also have Eevee. Eevee being a colorless type lets you Glass Trumpet to it, which is quite interesting. So I think there will be decks that try and use Angelite as well. Against these Stage 2 decks, it can be really crippling because obviously they can only play 4 Rare Candy. So being able to shuffle in like their once they're out of a couple of Rare Candies in the late game, shuffle in their Stage 2s and really try and cripple their board does seem quite powerful. Similarly, like if you can gust something up against like a Regidrago or something and can shuffle their double Regidrago V-Star into the deck, that's like such a big tempo swing. You don't do anything on your turn, I guess, technically, but you then have a turn to follow up with like a Magical Charm. So they have to deal with you shuffling their Pokemon in, and then also with the fact that this Sylveon technically has like 370 HP, not 270, 370 HP on the following turn with Magical Charm. So yeah, I feel like this card is quite powerful. Again, it might be another one which is just trying to do it a little bit too much, and it doesn't actually ever come off like consistently enough. Again, it didn't do particularly well in any of the large-scale tournaments in Japan. It's done okay in some of the Japanese League Cup style events. Some of the Japanese League Cup events have been like with crazy lists as well, so I think you definitely could improve on some of those lists for sure. But yeah, I personally really like this card. I think it's going to be one that I'm going to try out. It'll be interesting to see whether it translates to a proper deck or not. But yeah, I feel like there's some very powerful things you can do in the late game with Angelite for sure. This is the Eevee that I mentioned, Boosted Evolution. You evolve it if this Eevee is in the active spot on your first turn or during the turn it was put into play. So one, you can stay out of range of, obviously only having 50 HP is pretty bad. It means you can stay out of range of things like the Dusclops, things like Dragapult and stuff like that. Obviously you're still going to have them on the bench, which is a bit awkward, but regardless, it's a nice little ability to have. I can't remember whether we have any 70 HP EVs. They may just be better, just because having the raw HP might be better than having this ability, but regardless, one to keep in mind. We have Terra Orb, which says search your deck for a Terra Pokemon, reveal it and put it into your hand and shuffle your deck. I don't think this is going to be seeing huge amounts of play, but I can definitely see this making its way into Arven decks, into Pidgeot decks, into any of these kinds of decks which have ways of tutoring out items as a one-off. More than anything, it means that you don't have to Ultra Ball to find things like Charizard EX. You can use your Terra Orb instead. I don't know whether I think it will be like in and out a bit like the Feather Ball. I think the Feather Ball is probably a good example of one. Feather Ball in Terapagos EX. Sometimes he's played, sometimes people are happy without playing it, but it's a way of being able to search for a specific Pokemon without having to use an Ultra Ball, and that's where I kind of see this fitting. It has a lot more limited use, so it could potentially not quite be good enough in things like Charizard and Dragapult, but I could see it potentially being a one-off just for Arven, like being able to Arven it out, and not having to have like a strong hand or not having to waste resources or spend resources to Ultra Ball away like cards just to get your Terra Pokemon out. And then the A-Spec for this deck was Precious Carrier. Search your deck for any number of basic Pokemon and put them onto your bench, then shuffle your deck. So it very obviously reminiscent of the kind of effect you would want on turn 1, a bit like VIP Pass, obviously a bit fairer because this is an A-Spec, so you only get like it's not, you have to like dedicate your A-Spec spot to it, so there's a bit more of a cost to it than just every deck playing VIP Pass like there once was. There have been some Japanese Charizard lists that have adopted playing Precious Carrier over any other A-Spec just to be able to guarantee a board going first, which is quite interesting. Again, obviously not being able to search it out is a bit awkward, and a lot of the time between like Arven and stuff and Nest Balls and things like that and Forest Sealstone and Poffins, you can do that being able to, you can weave together a 4 Pokemon bench with Arven, but still you could potentially play this in these kinds of stage 2 decks, so just guarantee you have a board to try and build on turn 2. I still feel like Unfair Stamp is probably the best. I think Unfair Stamp is really, really strong in Charizard, and I still think it's going to take a lot for me to be persuaded otherwise. But I can see Precious Carrier definitely being an option. And similarly, there could be other decks that want to adopt it. The fact that this can go into everything is pretty impressive. So we do have a handful of Supercharge Breaker cards. We don't have the full set. I'm sure we'll do a full set breakdown when we get it. So because of that, I'm going to turbo through a lot of these. But let's start with the trainers. And Miraculous Intercom is the first one. Again, it's an A-Spec card that says, choose up to 2 supporter cards from your discard pile, reveal them and put them into your hand. Don't think this is strong enough for an A-Spec, simply because, again, we already have great A-Specs out there. And we already have Palpad and lots of draw on board effects right now. Things like Fezandipity, Mew-EX, stuff like that. So I think most of the time, just having a Palpad in your deck is going to be just as good. Obviously, this guarantees that you get the supporter you want, but I think that's a very expensive cost to not be able to use something like a Prime Catcher or an Unfair Stamp anyway. So yeah, I don't think this is quite strong enough as an ace spec that I would want to dedicate it into, like even decks like Roaring Moon, which play Quad Sada and stuff like that. I still feel like, because these decks are typically very aggressive, they want Prime Catcher, and because they draw a huge amount of cards, the Palpad draw engine works like particularly well for them. So yeah, a bit of a weak ace spec in my opinion overall. Colbur Berry is another of these berry cards that just reduces the amount of damage you take from a specific type of Pokemon. This time it's Dark type. Again, none of these have really seen any play. I think you need to be in a very specific meta for them to be worth it. Technical Machine Fluorite, I think is how I want to pronounce it. I don't know whether that's correct. Let me know in the comments. Is a new TM, which is pretty cool. We haven't seen a TM for a little while now, so I'm glad we're still seeing some TMs. For 3 energy, so like typically you can see this is going to be on one of these Terra Pokemon because it's got 3 different types of energy. You can use the Fluorite attack, you discard all energy from this Pokemon, but you heal all damage from each of your Terra Pokemon. That's pretty huge. The big combo for this is actually pairing this with Cramorant from the Lost Origin expansion, because that would let you use this for free, so you wouldn't have to have this awkward energy cost, and you could theoretically heal all of your Terra Pokemon from there. I think you need a very specific deck where there's been multiple Terra Pokemon that have taken a hit, like tank to hit, move to the bench, another one's gone into the active, tank to hit, move to the bench, then I think you need to probably heal 2 Pokemon for this to be worth spending your attack on. So I think there's going to be a very, very small amount of decks that can actually make use of this, and because of that, I can't really picture in my head where this is going to fit into like decks, but obviously a very powerful effect, and that combination with Cramorant is quite cool, so it's going to be interesting to see whether this actually does see any play. I'm not convinced personally, but I'm sure there's some cleverer people out there than I am that can build some kind of deck which really takes advantage of Cramorant and some like strong tanky Terra Pokemon and tries to just build like a walling deck that gets away with spending a turn not really doing anything but just healing all of the damage off and resetting the board state. So yeah, going to be an interesting one to see whether people pick it up and play it. Next up, we have Cyrano. Search your deck for up to 3 Pokemon EX, reveal them and put them into your hand and shuffle your deck. Similar to Adventures of Discovery, I could see this maybe seeing play in... I think this needs to be... This is quite a niche one. It needs to be like a turbo deck, a bit like a Raging Bolt or a Roaring Moon, but it also needs to be a deck that doesn't rely on a supporter card per turn, so both of those decks wouldn't really make sense because of Sada. So I think this is going to fit in a very niche role, and I'm not sure where that is. Adventurous Discovery didn't really see any play until we ended up going for these like Arceus plus VMAX strategies, these 8 prize board states with like double VMAX plus V-Star. So we might be like in a waiting room until we have a meta like that where you don't need like your deck just has a lot of EX Pokemon and you don't need a supporter card to like weave things together. I can't really see seeing too much play otherwise. I don't think really like Miraidon doesn't want to see this. We have such good ways of finding EX Pokemon in these turbo decks already with between Nest Ball, like Miraidon sorts itself out. We have things like Techno Radar for the future decks. So yeah, I just don't really see where this card fits right now. I think we need to wait to see whether there's an archetype that really wants to I guess, well, even while we don't have any 3 prizes, it's so hard to justify. Yeah, I don't know. This card feels quite weird. I don't think there's really any archetypes that would want to play it right now, and I think we need a very specific deck where you want a lot of EXs but don't need to spend a supporter to attack or set anything up like that, which feels quite niche. So yeah, I'm wondering if I'm missing anything, but I don't think I am. We'll have to wait and see. Jasmine's Gaze is the next supporter. It says during your opponent's next turn, each of your Pokemon take 30 less damage from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. This includes new Pokemon that come into play as well. So this is quite an interesting one, being able to like having this kind of defensive supporter. I'm not sure whether 30 is enough damage to really warrant your supporter use for the turn. I think there may be, I guess maybe like some tanking Terrapago style decks maybe would play this as a one-off potentially because you can tutor it out at the right time with Noctowl, but they already have such good ways of like reducing damage between Buffalant and Bravery Charm anyway. So I'm not sure whether we have too many. Like we have a lot of decks that already go way over the top in terms of damage. Things like Raging Bolt can knock out like anything. So I think this is going to have to be in a deck where that 30 damage is like a specific breakpoint that you're trying to dodge. So this is probably going to be a pretty meta-dependent card, but it is cool seeing one of these defensive cards. We haven't seen anything like this in a little while. It's all been aggressive, deal more damage, take extra prizes, stuff like that. So yeah, pretty cool to see a more defensive, I guess a more defensive card overall. Then we have a couple of stadiums. We have the Exciting Stadium, which boosts your basic Pokemon's HP by 30. Again, this is going to be another one of those stadiums where if you have no better stadium to play in your like turbo basic deck, then this is going to be fine. But I think a lot of these turbo decks are typically going to play Pokestop, so I think for now Pokestop is probably going to be better than this. This in combination with Bravery Charm though does make your basics have plus 80, which is quite impressive. We are in a format where Stadium War is kind of being dominated by Area Zero Underdepths and decks that play that. Like they often play 4. So I think you like against those decks, you're going to struggle to win that Stadium War. This is really not a stadium that I think has a powerful enough effect that you want to play 4 of, I guess. So yeah, because of that, you're probably just going to be better off trying to invest your resources into more like consistency cards and playing things like Bravery Charms and stuff, which are less. Your opponent has less interaction over. So yeah, but I think this is probably the weaker of the two. The other stadium though, the Gravity Mountain, I think actually is quite interesting. Stage 2 Pokemon in play get minus 30 HP. So this is like an anti-stage 2 Pokemon, whereas the other one was like a pro-basic Pokemon. Both of them kind of being pro-basic / anti-stage 2 in a way, I guess. But This is really interesting. This is very powerful. Against some specific Pokemon, I'm thinking basically Charizard is definitely up there, being able to reduce your opponent's Charizard's HP down to 300 is a much more manageable number, and you'll see that we have a great new attacker that deals 300 momentarily. So that's kind of the combo you're going to see between those two. But even just being able to like maybe set up some damage and then reduce the amount of HP they have to take extra knockouts here and there could be quite interesting. Similarly, being able to reduce things like Pidgeot down to 250, make it a bit more manageable and stuff like that. So I think this one we'll see a little bit more play. Typically the stadiums which have like a more proactive effect rather than a reactive effect are better. So you can put the Gravity Mountain down and get immediate impact out of it, whereas you can't put the exciting stadium down and get immediate impact out of it. It depends on your opponent sort of hitting into you and running into that sort of damage threshold. With the Gravity Mountain, you can immediately try and capitalize on it, take an extra knockout here and there. So typically these kinds of more proactive stadiums are better, and that's why I think, similarly in this case, the Gravity Mountain is going to be better than the exciting stadium. Onto the Pokemon then, we have a Skeledirge, which has the same attack as Palkia, and Unaware, which prevents any effective attacks done to this Pokemon, which is quite interesting. I think realistically this isn't going to be strong enough, but if you really were dead set on playing this, you could play this in combination with the Terra Skeledirge, the Terra Metal one, which can also increase the amount of damage you do if you like discard Fire Energy, I think is its ability. So being able to Flare Recital for a huge amount of damage with the Area Zero Underdepths and stuff could be a fun rogue archetype. It's not going to be strong enough, but like there's a decent synergy there at least. We have Milotic EX, which has the Sparkling Scales ability, which prevents all damage and effects done to this Pokemon by your opponent's Terra Pokemon's attacks. Unfortunately, I think this is most of the time just a worse Mimikyu. Mimikyu definitely has a couple of other issues, but I think Mimikyu hits a wider range of Pokemon because obviously the Terra Pokemon are all EXs, so Mimikyu like already covers all of those, but also stops V Pokemon as well. Now, obviously that only has 70 HP and can be dealt with by things like not Dragapult, Dusknoir and stuff. Well, Dragapult I guess to an extent, but Dusknoir and stuff, and also only having 70 HP makes it a lot easier to deal with. But I think it is just better. It's a lot more splashable. It's a basic, all this kind of stuff. But that's not to say that Milotic, like a quad Milotic deck, couldn't work. I guess you're just going to have a much lower range of things that you're going to be preventing, because anything that's not a Terra Pokemon is going to be able to still attack you. So yeah, which is a real shame. This card art is absolutely stunning. I want to play this Milotic deck just because of how good this art looks. I really hope we get a good alt art or illustration ref for this one as well. We have another Iron Bundle, which for 3 energy deals 250 less for each color less than your opponent's active Pokemon's retreat cost. These kinds of effects never really do well, and I think we have better bundles out there right now, but this could be an interesting water-type attacker, I guess. Pikachu X is the big sort of poster Pokemon from the set. It's a basic Lightning Terra-type Pokemon, so immediately it's probably an upgrade to Mewtwo in the Miraidon Area Zero decks that sometimes see play, because this also has the Tenacious Heart ability, which says if this Pokemon has full HP and will be knocked out by damage from an attack from an opponent's Pokemon, it's not knocked out and the remaining HP becomes 10. So essentially, without pre-damaging this Pikachu, it cannot be knocked out, which means it's already better than the Mewtwo in the Miraidon deck, just because this can always sort of live a turn without any pre-damage. Also has the Topaz Bolt attack, which for 3 energy deals 300 damage. You discard 3 energy from this Pokemon. Again, with the various different ways of attaching to Terra Pokemon, things like Crispin, things like Sparkling Crystal, all of this stuff does mean that you can potentially Topaz Bolt on turn 2, or even turn 1, I guess, thinking about it going first, because you can also Electric Generator to this, which is kind of mental. So Topaz Bolt can be done on turn 1, which is quite crazy. 300 damage obviously pairs well with that Gravity Mountain, like I said, to be able to knock out even the strongest of Pokemon like Charizard and stuff. So yeah, I can see this definitely seeing some kind of this being some kind of deck. We'll also talk about another card momentarily, which could be another way of being able to consistently try and set up Topaz Bolts like turn after turn. So yeah, this is a pretty interesting one. I don't think it's like crazy good. I think it's just going to be good, but I think it will probably be another potentially like aggressive two prize aggro archetype that tries to just trade up. The fact that you have the fact that you're able to always live a turn without being pre-damaged means that you could Topaz Bolt with a fresh Pikachu, potentially take a hit, go down to 10 HP, and then Topaz Bolt again and try and take 4 prizes with 1 Pikachu, which is pretty crazy to think about. Because just being able to Topaz Bolt turn after turn is very strong. And one way you can do that is with the Magneton that we did already know existed, because it's going to be our Elite Trainer Box promo. The Overvolt Discharge ability says once during your turn you may attach up to 3 basic energy cards from your discard pile to your Lightning Pokemon any way you like. If you do use this ability, this Pokemon is knocked out. So another of these abilities that you can knock out your own Pokemon and potentially use an Iono, a Counter Catcher, in combination with, and also you get 3 energy onto your board for doing so, which is very powerful. 1, obviously with that Pikachu that I just mentioned, but 2, potentially just in like Miraidon decks, this could be quite cool. Being able to play Miraidon, and instead of going down the generator route, you have much less energy and you just get 3 energy into the bin, and then you're able to Overvolt just discharge and have plenty of 2 prizes, but also be on that odd prize trade where your opponent's on 5, but you're taking 2 prizes turn after turn, so you're like kind of ahead even though you're behind, and you're able to use, like I say, cards like the Counter Catcher and stuff like that as well. So yeah, very, very powerful card. I don't think this is going to be like anywhere near as powerful as some of the other discard or knocking out effects like the Dusknoir and stuff, but I think this could be really powerful in that Pikachu deck and potentially could be another way of playing Miraidon. Whether it will be a better way of playing Miraidon, I don't know. Generator is obviously still very powerful, but yeah, you can even like use this to power up Iron Hands or something, which is pretty crazy. You can just attach plus Overvolt Discharge to power up an Iron Hands on turn 2, and that could be like the new way of accelerating to get an aggressive Iron Hands. So yeah, very, very powerful, very interesting Pokemon there. We have Togekiss, which has the Wonder Kiss ability. Whenever your opponent's active Pokemon gets knocked out, flip a coin. If heads, take 1 more prize card for that knockout. Very, very interesting ability. I do not think it's going to be worth getting a Stage 2. I don't think people need to be worried too much about this effect, but I do think it's quite an interesting ability nonetheless. We have a Fluttermane, has Bewildering Transfer that lets you move all damage counters from one of your benched ancient Pokemon to your opponent's active Pokemon. People have obviously said, oh, this works great with Roaring Moon, but I really don't think it's strong enough to be played. You need your Roaring Moon to Frenzied Gouging, take 200 damage, then survive on 30 HP for a turn, and then you need to move into the Fluttermane and Bewildering Transfer just to deal 200 damage. I guess it's a 400 damage swing, but it's just to deal 200 damage, so yeah, I don't think this is really going to be good enough in that deck. I think I think it's very rare that your Roaring Moon is actually going to be surviving that long. So, yeah, I don't think it's really going to be worth it. Hydreigon EX is an interesting one. It has the Crashing Heads attack for 200 that discards the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. That's sort of attacking your opponent on 2 fronts. It's dealing a decent amount of damage whilst also discarding some resources from them, which is quite interesting. I think this is, again, we have better Dark-type Terrors, so I don't think this is going to see play really in comparison with Charizard, because Charizard, for the most part, will just be a stronger Pokemon. But I do think it was an interesting attack. At least the Hydreigon and the Zweilous also discard cards, so you can kind of build like a disruption or discarding strategy whilst also dealing some damage. Typically, a lot of these kinds of, or a lot of the more successful, I guess, control decks or disruption decks attack from multiple angles. Being able to have like put pressure on with your attack as well as discarding resources at the same time is very powerful. So yeah, it's a cool attack. I don't think it's really comparable to other dark type terrors we have, but regardless. And then Obsidian for 4 energy deals 130 to 3 of your opponent's Pokemon. Again, obviously very powerful, but we have Manaphy, we have lots of Terra Pokemon that can't be targeted, stuff like that. So yeah, very expensive for the cost. I don't think it's really comparable to the other Dark Terra type we have right now, but I did think Crashing Heads is a pretty cool Pokemon. We have an Eternatus, which is cool. I don't think this is, again, really going to be too strong, but it is cool to see Eternatus get a print. I feel like the previous like formats or the previous generation's legendaries often get forgotten about as soon as things roll over. So it's cool to see another Eternatus. Japan are also getting the Toxic Subjugation Petrant promo, which we already have as well. Penultimate card is this Tatsugiri, which has a sneaky pump attack for 100 damage, and you ignore all affecting your opponent's active Pokemon. Not bad for wall breaking, but in general, not really going to be strong enough on a 160 HP basic EX Pokemon. And then Cinnabar Lore lets you look at the top 10 cards of your deck, choose any number of Pokemon you find there and put them onto the bench, then shuffle the other cards back into your deck. Great highlight reel attack, but similarly to the Lapras, attaching 3 energy to a basic Pokemon to not do something like take multiple prize cards, or it's just not strong enough. Even if you're getting 5 different stage 2s onto your bench, you've had to put so many resources into your deck to try and get the Cinnabar Lore set up that the stage 2 payoff really is probably not going to be worth it. So yeah, it's just not really strong enough to justifiably try and build a deck around Cinnabar Lure, I don't think. Again, similar to the Lapras that we already have, that lets you attach a load of energy. Looking at the top 20, it's just so much resources to then almost like pass the turn over to your opponent anyway as well. Finally, we have Slaking EX, and this is a card that I am quite excited about. Slaking EX is a 340 HP stage 2, which is mental. It's a colourless type, and it has the Slacking Off ability, which says if your opponent has no Pokemon EX or V in play, this Pokemon can't attack. Obviously, that's kind of annoying, but we do have some other Slackings in format that could, if you can see that your opponent is definitely not playing any EX or V Pokemon in their deck, or they're trying to build up a board state where they don't have any in play, we have other Slackings right now that can deal a decent amount of damage in place of this one, so I don't think it's too bad of an ability. Similarly, there are so many decks right now that only attack with V or EX Pokemon that your opponent is going to need them in play. So if they don't have them in play, they just have a board state of sort of pretty weak attackers, evolving Pokemon, support Pokemon, stuff like that. So, and then again, similarly, there's plenty of support Pokemon in play, things like Rotom V, Mew EX, that people just have on their board to draw cards. Whilst all of those are in play, Slaking can attack. So I really don't think this ability is too detrimental whatsoever. It then has the Great Swing attack for 2 energy, dealing 280 damage. That's huge. You do have to discard an energy to use the attack, but I think that's fine, especially if you're pairing this with something like a counter gain from the previous set that will be in this set, from the previous Japanese set, I guess I should say, that will be in this set. You can technically Great Swing for 1 energy, which is mental, and just discard an energy and like turn after turn, just attach 1 energy, Great Swing for 280, and just discard that 1 energy. Obviously, this is double turbo. You can use double turbo with this as well to be able to... You only do 260, but that's still a decent enough amount of damage to knock out some 2-prize Pokemon. So, yeah, I really like this card. I think there's a lot of potential for this to be like a tanky Sharon's build, where you take it with your Slacking, you Great Swing, you Sharon, pick up Slacking, heal all that damage off, and you then attack with another Slacking turn after turn, similar to like some of the old Arceus, like tanky Arceus builds that we saw. Except this is 340 HP, which is, yeah, kind of crazy. It's going to be very interesting to see whether this is strong enough. Obviously, that was a stage 1. This is a stage 2, which is a bit awkward. But so I think you're going to be more disrupted by things like Ionu. But again, we have plenty of ways of being able to like find slack off and stuff with Fan Rotom. You can find like double slack off plus Bidoof or something, or slack off, and then I don't know, whatever you decide to build your deck around, slack off plus Bidoof and Squova or something. It's, I feel like being a colorless type is really good right now. So being able to just like lean into that Fan Rotom is definitely has a lot of potential and could be a very, very fun deck to play. Could even play it with that Rich Energy that I chatted about yesterday, being able to just attach over and over again and draw more cards every time you Sharon's loop this Slacking up. So yeah, very interesting card. I suspect it could be a pretty annoying wall archetype. I don't know whether it will quite see enough play to warrant it being a big part of the meta, but still could be an interesting one. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. There's still I think about 50 or so, 60 or so cards to reveal from this set. So we will do another sort of roundup of all of the other cards that we haven't discussed so far when they are released. But for now, I've been Jack from OmniPoke, and I look forward to seeing you guys in another video tomorrow. Cheers.